Story 1. This happened several years ago, and I am forever relieved I don't work in a restaurant anymore. Solidarity to all kitchen workers for the endless nonsense you have to deal with. At the time, I was working in the kitchen as an assembler. This can be one of the most clutch positions on the line, as you take all the food being prepared by the other cooks and organize it into tickets that can be taken out into the dining room. Accordingly, it is often a bottleneck for food leaving the kitchen. If you have a slow assembler, cooked food dies under the heating lamps. Grilled salmon dries out, fries become soggy, linguine Alfredo hardens into concrete. Really horrific stuff. It is imperative that food not sit in the window. I was working a weekday lunch shift, which is normally pretty slow. We must have provoked the wrath of the restaurant witches on this day though, because out of nowhere the store got hit with a tsunami of customers. I could just barely make out the other cooks through the clouds of shrimp scampi, fryer grease, and cheddar bay biscuits flying through the air. I knew the nonsense blizzard was headed my direction, and began putting empty plates up in the window with the shape of each ticket that was to leave the kitchen, a technique I had learned to help survive things like this. On the other side of the window, coordinating the servers, was my manager, Cuntface. Shouldn't use his real name, actually, let's call him Bob instead. Bob was hyperactive and had an irritating tendency to micromanage kitchen processes, a problem compounded by his not knowing how to run a kitchen. When I began putting empty plates in the window so that the incoming, interstellar-sized wave of seafood had something to land on, he stopped me. "What are you doing?" Bob asked. "I'm putting the plates and their sides in the window because we're about to have a very high volume of food coming through," I replied. "Well, this is Red Lobster, and here we do things the Red Lobster way. We plate the food when the food is ready, and we don't put sides on early." I tried explaining that the Red Lobster way was designed by sentient suits and ties physically incapable of holding a spatula. That our sacred way, as dictated in the good book of employee training, had died in the trenches of last year's endless shrimp special. That, while I appreciated the job, I wasn't prepared for an honorable death at the hands of this rush in order to uphold its most obscure tenets, but he wasn't having any of it. Bob insisted that I take the plates out of the window and only pass him plates and tickets that were 100% completed. Knowing full well that Bob was flying us by the book into a storm of nonsense, I put on a feces-resistant raincoat, rubbed some Vicks under my nose, and braced for impact. 30 minutes later, the window was in chaos. Finished food was left dying in the wings of the window, while I, swiftly enough to avoid reprimand, but with the fatalistic, mechanical movement of a flood pump removing water at a fraction of the rate at which it's arriving, plated up one finished ticket at a time. Bob was equal parts confused and furious, like a toddler whose toy was suddenly taken away. "What's this food waiting on?" he cried, gesturing towards a shriveled-up steak and its associated sides. "Well, that order is waiting on some fried shrimp, and I need to wait for the ticket to be complete before I plate it up." "Why is the ticket missing fried shrimp?" "Unfortunately, I'm not manning the fryer, sir, so I don't know." This continued for the better part of an hour. After the rush had passed and I was dumping its precipitated, liquid stuff from my galoshes, Bob approached me with the twitchy, nervous energy of a coked-up boxer or a hyper-caffeinated, insecure manager who needed to assert his dominance over the underpaid crew of some weird seafood restaurant. "Can I, speak to you in the walk-in for a moment?" "Sure thing." We walked to the cooler as I struggled to remember how to fight off an attacker armed with a kitchen knife from my days in Dish. "So, what happened back there?" Bob asked, arms folded, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "You said we should follow the system, and we did," I replied, mentally noting that he was standing in front of the walk-in's only exit. "But there were a lot of missed items on those tickets. We had food dying in the window." "I saw it. Yeah, it was pretty bad." "So why was the food missing?" "I don't know. I wasn't cooking the food. I was assembling it. I am the assembler." This line of questioning continued, with Bob trying to somehow pin what happened in the last hour on my willingness to comply with his orders, while I blithely insisted that I did exactly what was asked of me. After not being able to move past this point for several minutes, Bob made some sweeping statement about doing better next time and left. Incidentally, the next time I was assembling and Bob was on the other side of the window, nothing was said about the Red Lobster way, and the rush went smoother, albeit with some hotter plates and servers having to return for delayed items. I guess we ended up doing better, after all. Story 2. I 25-year-old female and my fiancé 25-year-old male found out we were expecting in early January. Unfortunately, we experienced a miscarriage and learned that the baby no longer had a heartbeat on February 26th. For about 2 weeks after that, I was physically going through the miscarriage, which meant a lot of bleeding, passing the remaining fetal tissue, and being emotionally distraught. I cried for an entire week. We lived in a different state from our families, so we were essentially going through this on our own. As soon as we found out about the miscarriage, my fiancé told my parents and then informed his mother. His mother had been excited about becoming a grandmother and all that. I'm not exactly sure how that phone call went, but presumably it went fine. However, the next day he began receiving text messages from distant relatives expressing their condolences and other sentiments. Right away, we knew she had told people. I told my fiancé that he should at least inform his father his parents are divorced and his siblings before his mother got to them. Once he called to share the news, they all already knew, every single one of them. That honestly made me very upset. I didn't think it was her place to share such personal news. On top of that, she never texted me, and she never called to ask how I was doing or anything. I felt like something deeply personal that I was experiencing had been reduced to nothing more than gossip. My fiancé texted her. "Why are you telling everybody?" She just ignored the message. She never tried to call him either. He decided to ignore her too because she would occasionally send random texts, like her flight information if she was traveling, but never anything meaningful or considerate. Whatever. Fast forward to a few weeks ago, we decided it was finally time to plan our wedding since we've been engaged for 3 years. I sent out our save the date cards, and she didn't respond or ask us about it at all. I felt that this would have been the perfect opportunity for her to reach out and, I don't know, maybe act like a caring mother. A couple of days ago, she made a video call to my fiancé, but he was working and couldn't answer, so he called her back the next day. We thought maybe she was finally going to ask about the wedding, or perhaps even apologize. Nope. She was just calling because she was on vacation and wanted to show him some things. That annoyed my fiancé, and he said, "Oh, I thought you were going to apologize." She replied, "I never saw that message." My fiancé responded, "Okay, well, you still told everyone when it wasn't your place to," and she said, "I only told your dad and sister," which was clearly not true, since we had received messages from distant relatives on her side. My fiancé just hung up the call because he couldn't handle the dishonesty. She then sent him a text message that read, "You know what? I'm so sorry that you feel some type of way or like some sort of victim, because I feel how I feel about losing the excitement of becoming a grandmother. It's unfortunate that you feel the need to punish me for my emotions. These are your choices. I'm not a bad person. Clearly, you feel otherwise. That is your opinion. Sorry for not being what you expect in a mother." Ma'am? Really? We kind of are the ones affected here. Does she honestly believe she's the victim? Whatever she felt, we felt it 20 times over. At this point, I genuinely hope she doesn't attend the wedding because she brings unnecessary drama. It's unbelievable how some people can behave. Edit. She's done so many things over time that I could go on and on about it. But just to give you all a general idea of the kind of behavior we're dealing with, she has an identical twin sister that she hasn't spoken to in 3 years because her twin couldn't take her to the airport one day. Story 3. Hello, so I've recently become a teacher, and of course, I've had plenty of run-ins with entitled parents, so I thought I'd share one in my class. I teach K-6. For context, Sydney is in lockdown and has been for since July. So we've been doing school remotely for about 10 weeks at this point of the school year. So this is all during online learning. So with our lessons, we use Google Classroom and Google Slides, and sometimes we give out interactive worksheets using separate Google Slides. Students then hand in their work on Google Classroom, where I can mark it. We also use Zoom to interact with the kids. We have daily 9:30 Zoom meetings to go through the work for 30 minutes. Then I read with some of the kids. I usually finish Zooming at about 11 a.m. Then throughout the day, I offer children who are struggling extra Zoom sessions and support if they need something explained to them, mainly if it's too hard to explain to them over Google Classroom. The Zoom are recorded for child protection laws. This is a statewide all levels of education thing, so this happens with high schools and university Zooms. It's just for protection. Now I should also note, we start our school year in January, and I've taken over this class from another teacher who went on leave. Sorry for the long context, but let's get started. So it's a typical day. I'm sitting at my desk, getting some work done for future lessons, when I see a message come up on the group chat. It's from one of my students. She's really sweet. She's struggling to submit work. So I hop into a Zoom, and I spend about 20 minutes going over how to submit work and walk her through it, so she understands for next time. So the next day, I again got a message from the student asking for help. So I hop into a Zoom again and go through it with her again. Sometimes kids need clarity. My students are 8-9. So next day, guess what happens? If you guessed the student needed help, you get a star on your star chart. So again, I hop into a Zoom a third time, but this time, the mother is there. This time, she seems a bit frustrated at me for not showing her daughter how to submit when I tell her we have been doing this for 2 days already. She looks at her daughter, then says, "Well, obviously your instructions aren't good enough for my daughter. Can't you be more clear?" Now, when you work with young children, they aren't going to get something first. I get that. Sometimes they need a few times to get it right. I explain this to the mother, and she is a bit irritated and says to me, "Well, explain it to me so I know how to do it." So I walk them both through how to submit work, and we end it there. So the next day, I have this student in one of my reading groups. Now she was meant to leave the reading group, but obviously didn't do it right, and she was still in the meeting with her mic on. I was still talking to another student and their nice mom and going through work when we both heard this conversation. For your information, I was screen sharing and didn't realize she had her mic on as I wasn't paying attention, more focused on explaining. Entitled Mother. So how did it go? KID, good. I loved the book we read. Was he doing a good enough job? I need to talk to the principal. Something has. I was able to finally mute her and kick her out of the meeting before she realized I could hear her. I apologized to the nice mom and kids still in the meeting and moved on. So the next day, I got a phone call from my principal. Now my principal is a fantastic man. He defends his staff and treats them with absolute respect. So he calls to tell me that he got a complaint about me. He explained what the complaint was and was following up with me. Now if you guessed the complaint was from the entitled mother, you get another star on your chart. So he explained to me that the entitled mother said I was very unhelpful with her daughter. I was constantly unavailable, and when I did help, I was rude, standoffish to her and her daughter. I constantly kick her out of Zoom meetings because I don't like her, and I should be fired, and the old teacher return. Now my principal, the absolute legend, said he would investigate the matter and get back to her. He's not one to believe everything without getting all the facts first. So I explained my side of the story and told him the entire story, the mother being irritated during Zoom 3, the conversation that was heard, and explained why I kicked the student out of the meeting. We then went through the recordings and we clarified that my side was entirely true. My principal thanked me, explained to me that this isn't the first time she complained. She did this last year during remote learning, and when the students got back, he just figured she liked the old teacher better, who admittedly is an amazing teacher and probably doesn't like newly graduated teachers. Her teacher last year was a new grad teacher too. He also told me it was a good lesson for me on how crazy some parents can be, so he said he'd ring her back and deal with her. I later heard from the principal it was all dealt with and I didn't need to stress. He's a top bloke. Story 4. This event happened a couple of years ago, in 2023 I believe, shortly before the 4th of July. Now, we did not directly encounter the woman commonly referred to as a Karen in this story, and my dad and I didn't witness much of what happened firsthand. However, we were filled in on the details afterward, so this story is told from various points of view. So, a couple of years ago, my family and I were doing some workout in the backyard. At one point, we got hungry and decided to buy some Burger King using a few coupons I had. My dad and I left the house in his car to go pick up the food. I was simply looking out the window, admiring the cute little American flags that were pinned along the sidewalk to celebrate the 4th of July. A bit of information about these flags. I don't know how many places in the United States do this, but the city I live in has an annual tradition where small American flags are pinned along the sidewalk of one street, stretching from one end all the way to the other, in celebration of Independence Day. I've lived next to this street my whole life, and as far as I can remember, it's the only street that participates in this specific tradition. Again, I'm not sure how many cities in the country do this, it's just what I'm most familiar with. The important point is that these flags belong to the city, not to individual homeowners. So, I'm sure someone could be arrested or fined if they were caught stealing or damaging them. Anyway, as we were returning home, driving down our street toward the house, I noticed some of those American flags had been knocked down along the sidewalk. And it wasn't just one or two, there were a ton of them. Flags had been knocked over all along the sidewalk, stretching nearly a mile. We started wondering what might have caused them to fall over. Either the city hadn't done a great job securing them in place, or maybe there had been a strong gust of wind that knocked several of them down. We got our answer when we arrived back home. There was a police car parked across the street from our house. My mom was still in the yard, and she had seen what had happened. We asked her about it, and she told us that a woman in a motorized wheelchair had been running over the small American flags, and the police had come to arrest her. Well, that was the most information we got about the situation. We didn't approach the police officers across the street to ask for any further details, as it was really none of our business. But I couldn't help but wonder why that woman had done such a thing. Was she treating it like a game, thinking it was harmless fun to knock down the flags? Was she possibly under the influence while operating her motorized wheelchair, which I think might still count as impaired driving? Or did she simply dislike the country and decide to protest by running over the flags? Either way, in my head, I ended up nicknaming her the unpatriotic Karen for knocking down a large number of little American flags with her motorized vehicle. I didn't hear any yelling or screaming from the woman, so I assume she didn't put up much of an argument or resistance regarding her actions. Still, I felt convinced she fit the stereotype. After all, she managed to knock down nearly a mile's worth of flags along one sidewalk, all while using a wheelchair. That had to be intentional. It didn't seem like an accident to me, which kind of ruled out my earlier theory of impaired driving. I might never know the real reason why she did it, but it became quite the memorable story, especially since my dad and I only saw the aftermath of the whole situation while we were out picking up our Burger King order. Update. So it appears that this post of mine has irritated quite a few people, mainly because I admitted that I know nothing about the woman in the wheelchair and still made the assumption that she was acting like a Karen based on her behavior. The truth is, there could be any number of reasons she did what she did, and we don't have any actual information about who she is or what her motivations were. I never spoke to her, and neither did anyone else in my family. We didn't witness the entire situation, only the aftermath, and we got our information secondhand. So, realistically, my post isn't all that reliable. I was making assumptions without having the full picture, and I now realize that wasn't fair. Looking back, it was poor judgment on my part. To anyone who feels their time was wasted by reading a story based on a huge assumption, I sincerely apologize. I should have been more thoughtful before drawing conclusions about someone I don't even know. That said, while the situation was certainly unusual and surprising at the time, I now understand how jumping to conclusions without facts can lead to misunderstandings or even unfair characterizations. My intention wasn't to spread misinformation or make harsh assumptions. I was simply sharing what had seemed like a strange, almost comical neighborhood incident at the time. Still, the truth matters, and I appreciate those who pointed out that I was being presumptive. I'll be more mindful about how I share stories like this in the future. Thanks for taking the time to read it. Story 5. I was scanning through my photo gallery on my phone, and I found a picture of me and my partner on a date at the aquarium. The picture was of him and me posing in front of a large tank. A purple octopus was sticking on the glass behind us. When I saw this picture, I was suddenly reminded about an incident a few months ago that I will never forget. Although I had a fun time spending it with Nathan, my partner, a different memory is associated whenever I hear the word aquarium. So, I decided that I would share this story with you guys. It was during the weekend, and a lot of families and couples were present at the aquarium to spend time and enjoy looking at the different kinds of aquatic animals. My partner and I were at the Octopus Tank Aquarium, which was a few feet away from a much larger shark tank. As my partner and I were taking pictures, we suddenly heard a commotion near the shark tank. Curious about what it was, I dragged my partner to have a look at what was happening. There was a staff worker in the middle of the room who was trying to calmly talk to a blonde, angry woman. Beside her was a young boy, about 10 years old, who looked embarrassed to be at the center of attention. In the background was a beautiful aquatic landscape inside the shark tank. An array of fishes, stingrays, and sharks were swimming peacefully inside, a complete contrast to the chaotic commotion outside their glass tanks. There was a staff diver who was giving food to the other animals inside the shark tank. I didn't need to ask anyone what happened, as the person involved was more than willing to share the story as she yelled out loud for everyone to hear. From her words, I could get the gist of the story easily. "What do you mean no? I told you my son wants to try diving inside the tank and experience swimming with the sharks and manta rays or whatever those things are called. I am a customer. Are you denying me the service I deserve?" My eyes widened as I heard the woman's words. This was actually the first time I saw a Karen acting out in real life. I have only seen Karens on YouTube and TikTok, and they would always get my blood boiling whenever I see how rude and mean they were. She even had the stereotypical Karen haircut style on her head. I was really tempted to pull out my camera, but I was too focused on watching the scene. Despite how rude and mean Karen was, the staff was very patient with her. "It's not like that, ma'am. No visitor is allowed to swim inside the tanks. But there's no sign that says swimming is not allowed." We didn't think that it would be necessary to set up a sign." "That's not my problem. Because there is no sign. My son now had expectations to swim in your tanks today, and you're telling me that it is not allowed?" "Yes, ma'am. I'm afraid I cannot help you with that. It's company policy." "But I remember that kids were swimming inside the tank before. Why is this any different? Are you discriminating?" "No, we are not. I'm sorry, ma'am. What you saw must have been a special event in the aquarium that allowed children to experience swimming in the tank. But there were staff members who were in charge of leading and guiding the kids to swim inside. So, there's a diver inside the tank. They can take care of my son." She raised her eyebrows as if her words were common sense. I was stunned at her behavior. The nerve. My blood was boiling as I listened to her, demanding that people would go out of their way just to satisfy her. And apparently, I'm not the only one confused about how her mind works, as the staff stuttered when he replied. "Like I said, ma'am, your son, or anyone that isn't a staff, is not allowed to swim inside the tank. There needs to be a protocol for that. Plus, even if the diver is inside the tank and can watch over your kid, he still needs to visit other tanks and feed the animals. Then why don't you dive in the tank and take care of my son? You work here, right? Don't tell me you can't. Is this aquarium hiring useless people?" "That's not how it works, ma'am. That special event was prepared and processed for weeks." "Well then, prepare for it now then. Are you telling me this is how the aquarium's workers treat their visitors? I paid good money for me and my son to come here, and my son cannot have the experience we were expecting. Okay, ma'am, we cannot just let your son swim just because you want to or at a moment's notice. But if you want, there are other attractions here in the aquarium that your son can enjoy. I would be more than happy to tell you about them or escort you there. Well, he doesn't want the other activities. He wants to swim in the shark tank. Are you not listening to me? Now other parents were telling her to calm down. There were kids in the aquarium. Heck, her son was beside her. People were now voicing their opinions and yelling at Karen to stop and calm down. The tension was getting thicker as more people were annoyed at Karen's attitude. And apparently, Karen didn't like this. Shut up, mind your own business. My son wants to swim, and he will be given the chance to swim. She yelled at the crowd who were siding at the staff. Who am I kidding? Nobody sided with her entitled self. Her voice got louder, and I noticed other staff were speaking to their radios, either calling the manager or security. Meanwhile, her son was pulling on her arm. Mom, I don't need to swim in the shark tank, I can just… The mother cut her son off. No, Adam, you will be allowed to swim. I will then take a picture of you swimming inside the tank with all the animals so I can show it to your dad and my friends. What? The gall of the woman. It wasn't her son who wanted to swim. It was her selfishness so she can brag about it. The audacity made me angry. Here she was creating a scene and ruining everyone's day. Karen turned her attention to the staff. I need to speak to your manager. I know the owner of this aquarium. I can just give them a call and let them know how rude you were to me. A woman from the crowd challenged her. Oh yeah, what's the owner's name then? This made Karen pause like she didn't expect anyone to question her. It's Mr. Blue. From her actions, I could tell that she was bluffing. At that time, I was sure that she chose the name Blue because it's the color of the ocean and water. It was probably the first thing that came to her mind. The staff in front of her was obviously exasperated at her attitude as he told her, "The owner of the aquarium is actually a female, ma'am." This made everyone laugh and snicker at her being caught lying. Karen blushed as she had been exposed and glared at everyone in the crowd, but her attention shifted to the staff again. Oh, it must have changed owners then. I thought Mr. Blue was still the owner. He never told me that the ownership had changed. Actually, ma'am, the ownership hasn't changed at all. This aquarium has been in her family for generations. There was never a change of ownership. Stop lying. Your manager would hear of this, that his staff member is lying. Her. Huh. My manager is a woman, ma'am. Karen must have busted a nerve from the humiliation she was getting. But the worker didn't do anything wrong at all. He was just telling her the truth. However, seeing that the situation wasn't going her way, Karen was going out of control, like a volcano erupting underwater. Screw you. You're making me look back. I'm not the villain here. You are. My son just wants to swim in the tank and you people aren't allowing it. How hard could it be? Give him that equipment for breathing, and that diver inside can look after him. I'm glad that she wasn't talking to me, or else I might punch her in the throat. My patience is not as abundant as the staff who is talking to her. She looked angry as her face was turning red from all her screaming. More and more people were closing in to see the commotion. Not wanting to create an even bigger scene, a different worker approached Karen and the staff she was talking to. Hello, ma'am. We are very sorry that you aren't happy with your current experience. You should be. I paid money for the tickets and waited in line only to be treated like this. I can take you to my manager, ma'am, so that you could speak to her in her office. Karen scoffed at this, but I heard her softly say, "Finally." She agreed and took her son's hands, her blonde hair fluttering as she turned around and followed the workers. Judging from her arrogant facial expression, she probably thought that she was going to get what she wanted. She and her son were taken to see the manager of the aquarium. I pity the staff and the manager who will meet her next. But now that she's gone, although the awkwardness was still in the room, the person who caused it all was now gone. Everyone continued with what they were doing. My partner and I were filling our phones with pictures while others moved to a different area. After a while, I got thirsty and Nathan brought me near the exit as he noticed that there were water bottles sold there. As we entered the large hall, I heard a familiar screeching voice that was filled with anger. "I will sue you. Mark my words. You will be hearing from my lawyer. You cannot do this to me." My jaw dropped as I watched the Karen from earlier near the Shark Tank getting dragged towards the exit by the security. 2 guards were holding each of her arms as she struggled to get out of them, kicking, screaming, and cursing as loud as she could. I couldn't see her son anywhere. Maybe another family member took him, or he was being taken care of by a staff member. The only thing that was on my mind that day was, what the heck had happened in the manager's office? I will get the media and the police involved in this. This is illegal. Screw all of you. This aquarium was so bad anyway. I will never come back here again. I bet this isn't the first time she said those words. The funniest thing was that as she was being escorted, the crowd clapped and cheered. Yes, clapped and cheered. There were even some individuals shouting, "Goodbye, Karen," at her. If only you could see Karen's face. It was really hilarious. This aquarium should put a "No Karens" sign on the entrance to stop people like her from entering and disturbing everyone's day. At that, my partner and I continued to have fun in the aquarium. When he drove me home, we were cracking up as we talked about that entitled woman earlier. Turns out, that was also his first time meeting a Karen. I guess entitled people really are everywhere. Story 6. In an attempt to not dox myself, this story is going to have several details somewhat less than fully truthful, which shouldn't impact the story too much. I hope that is okay, otherwise this can be removed, and I will not complain. My then fiancée and I had planned our wedding right when COVID was hitting the news. She, a lawyer, thought it might be good to get some event insurance, which would cover cancellation due to any really seriously impactful change to our wedding plan. For example, something out of our control that meant X% of guests could not attend on Y timeline, including causes such as weather or pandemic. The insurance company agreed on several conditions, one of them being that they would be the ones to negotiate rescheduling costs, which we thought was fine. My fiancée commented on how that would backfire on them, as they would need to negotiate with her new mother-in-law for one of the services. We covered the venue, staff, caterers, florist, and all other supporting services, which we had mostly given full payment in advance by this point. They wouldn't insure the bar services. Oh well. When COVID immediately took hold and we had to cancel all our plans and reschedule, the fight with insurance began. We had to get our own lawyer, which is when I learned that my wife apparently had the insurance company by the neck. It's still not finally over, but we have thus far achieved the following results, in chronological order. The judge confirmed that my fiancée's contract provisions were perfectly sound. He noted that her provisions for a cancellation and rescheduling timeline were very generous. This part alone took about 6 months. The judge asked the insurance company lawyers to describe some reasonable circumstances that could make a successful claim, if not the circumstances in question. What, exactly, are they covered for that you might sell them insurance in good faith, that it might be exercised? No good answer was offered from the reaction of the judge. Our wedding rescheduling costs for all services were put into escrow. It happened when the insurance company lawyer pissed off the judge by asking him to recuse himself as he was insured by a subsidiary of their parent company. This didn't go over well at all when the judge pointed out that if they were able to retrieve his data, they were indistinctly acting as a single entity from their parent company since they directly represented the information. Amusingly, several of our services were yet to actually be confirmed by the service provider, as we had intended to trim down many of them. The vendors did not let on to this fact when asked, so the amount in escrow was well in excess of anything we ever intended to shell out. The vendors and the insurance company have yet been unable to successfully and wholly reschedule. Only the florist is able to meet the commitments required due to COVID. The timeline has now been exceeded and the escrow account was transferred into our accounts. The contract has been fulfilled and we're now quibbling over crumbs. The insurance company is being fined and must perform external audits. The insurance company lawyers are being chastised heavily by the judge for their conduct in court. We lost our battle for our court costs, but they didn't amount to much in the grand scheme. All the service providers, being local or family, have decided to provide free or at-cost services to us for any future wedding. We're trying to offer to pay, and they just refuse. I ended up putting all the money into GME and made a tidy profit on that as well. Not crazy, but more than 25%, which just put us at our retirement goal. We're not close to retirement age. It's been a good year for us, so we donated 20% of our savings to charity today. Support your local nature conservancies, and a good portion of it is insurance money. We did a small private ceremony during the proceedings and will eventually do a proper redo with family one day, maybe.